Hello, my name's Maia. I'm from the Little Angel Theatre and I'm here to tell you the story of the Velveteen Rabbit. There was once a Velveteen Rabbit, and in the beginning he was really splendid. His coat was made of rich brown velvet, he had real thread whiskers, and his ears were lined with pink sateen. On Christmas morning, when he sat wedged in the top of the boy's stocking, with a sprig of holly between his paws, the effect was charming. For at least 2 hours, the boy loved him. But then, aunts and uncles came to dinner, and there was a great rustling of tissue paper and unwrapping of presents. And in the excitement of looking at all the new toys, the Velveteen Rabbit was forgotten. For a long time he lived in the toy cupboard or on the nursery floor, and no one thought very much about him. Newer and brighter toys came into the toy box, and they had special tricks. Some could move when the boy pushed a button, others bounced up as high as the ceiling. But the Velveteen Rabbit had no special tricks or buttons. No wonder the boy is choosing these new toys, thought the rabbit. At night, when the toys were all back in the toy box, the other toys talked with pride about the fine things they could do and the beautiful things they were modelled on. But the Velveteen Rabbit remained quiet, for he could not claim to be a model of anything. He didn't even know that real rabbits existed. He thought they were all stuffed with sawdust like himself. And so the poor little rabbit was made to feel very insignificant and lonely. And the only person in the whole toy box who was kind to him at all was the Skin Horse. The Skin Horse had lived in the nursery for longer than any of the others. He was so old that his brown coat was bald in patches, and most of the hairs in his tail had been pulled out. But he was wise, for he had seen a long line of new mechanical toys arrive to boast and swagger, only to see them break weeks later and be thrown away. "Don't worry," said the Skin Horse, "for nursery magic is very strange and wonderful, and soft toys like us really are the lucky ones. We get loved the most, and when soft toys get loved and loved, we can become real." "Oh, what is real?" said the Velveteen Rabbit. "Does it mean having things that buzz inside you and a stick-out handle?" "Real isn't how you are made," said the Skin Horse. "It's a thing that happens to you. When a child loves you for a long, long time, not just to play with, but really loves you, then you become real." "Does it happen all at once? Like being wound up?" the rabbit asked. "Oh no, it takes a long time," said the Skin Horse. "Generally, by the time you are real, most of your hair has been loved off. Your eyes drop out and you get loose in the joints and very shabby. But these things don't matter at all, because once you are real, you can't be ugly, except to people who don't understand." Well, that all sounded fine to the Velveteen Rabbit. But how could that ever happen as long as he was stuck inside the toy box? One evening, when the boy was going to bed, he couldn't find the jumping dog that always slept with him. He looked around, and seeing that the toy box was open, he made a swoop, and his fingers closed around something soft. He dragged it out by one ear and into his arms. It was his old bunny. That night, and for many nights after, the Velveteen Rabbit slept in the boy's bed. At first, he found it rather uncomfortable, for the boy hugged him very tight, and sometimes he rolled over on him. But very soon he grew to like it. And when the boy dropped off to sleep, the rabbit would snuggle down under his little warm chin and dream, with the boy's hands clasped close around him all night long. And so time went on, and the little rabbit was very happy. So happy that he never noticed how his beautiful velveteen fur was getting shabbier and shabbier, his tail becoming unsewn, and all the pink rubbed off his nose where the boy had kissed him. Spring came, and they had long days in the garden, for wherever the boy went, the rabbit went too. He had rides in the wheelbarrow, picnics on the grass, and lovely fairy huts built for him under the raspberry bushes. One day, when the boy was called in for dinner, the rabbit was accidentally left on the lawn until long after dusk, and the boy's mother had to come and look for him because, well, the boy couldn't go to sleep unless he was there. But the rabbit was wet through and covered in mud, and the mother grumbled as she tried to clean him off. "Fancy all that fuss for a toy," she said. The boy sat up in bed and stretched out his hands. "Oh, give me my bunny," he said. "You mustn't say that. He's not a toy. He's real." When the little rabbit heard that, he was so happy, for he knew that what the Skin Horse had said was true at last. The nursery magic had happened to him, and he was a toy no longer. He was real. The boy himself had said it. That night, he was almost too happy to sleep, and so much love stirred in his little sawdust heart that it almost burst. Weeks passed, and the little rabbit grew very old and shabby. But the boy loved him just as much. He loved him so hard that he loved all his whiskers off, and the pink lining to his ears turned grey, and his brown fur faded. But to the boy, he was still beautiful, and that was all the little rabbit cared about. One day, the boy became sick. His forehead got very hot, and he became so weak that he couldn't get out of bed. When the doctor came, the little Velveteen Rabbit lay there, hidden under the bedsheets, for he was afraid that if they found him, someone might take him away, and he knew that the boy needed him. Soon, the boy became too ill to play, and the little rabbit found it rather boring with nothing to do all day long. But he snuggled down patiently and looked forward to the time when the boy would be well again and they could play games like they used to. All sorts of delightful things he planned, and while the boy was half asleep, he crept up close to the pillow and whispered them in his ear. And over time, the boy got better. The doctor was still worried about the boy because he didn't want him to get sick again. So he suggested that his room should be disinfected and all the books and toys that the boy played with in bed must be burnt. "But what about his old bunny?" the boy's mother asked. "That," said the doctor. "Why, it's a mass of germs. Burn it at once. Get him a new one. He mustn't have that any more." And so the little rabbit was thrown into a sack of rubbish and carried out to the end of the garden where it was emptied, ready to make a bonfire. That night, the boy slept in a different room, and he had a new bunny to sleep with him. While the boy was asleep, his old Velveteen Rabbit lay outside among the rubbish at the bottom of the garden, and he felt very lonely. A great sadness came over him. What use was it to be loved and become real if it all ended like this? And a tear, a real tear, trickled down his shabby little velvet nose and fell to the ground. And then a strange thing happened. For where the tear had fallen, a mysterious flower grew out of the ground, and as it grew and the bud of the flower opened, out of it stepped a fairy. She gathered the little rabbit up in her arms and kissed him on his velveteen nose that was all damp from crying. "Little rabbit," she said, "don't you know who I am? I am the magic nursery fairy. I take care of all the playthings that the children have loved. When they are old and worn out and the children don't need them anymore, then I come and turn them into real." "Wasn't I real before?" asked the little rabbit. "Oh, you were real to the boy because he loved you," the fairy said. "But now you shall be real to everyone." And she held the little rabbit close in her arms and flew with him into the wood to where the wild rabbits lived. "I've brought you a new friend," the fairy said to the rabbits. "You must be very kind to him and teach him all he needs to know in Rabbitland, for he is going to live with you for ever and ever." And she kissed the little rabbit again and put him down on the grass. "Run and play, little rabbit," she said. He looked down at himself, and to his surprise, he noticed that instead of dingy velveteen fabric, he now had brown fur, soft and shiny. His ears twitched by themselves, and he had real working legs. He took one leap, and the joy of using those legs was so great that he went hopping about the grass on them, jumping sideways and whirling round as the others did, and he was so happy. He was a real rabbit at last, at home with the other rabbits. Winter soon passed, and in the spring, when the days grew warm and sunny, the boy went out to play in the garden. And while he was playing, a rabbit crept out from the trees and hopped towards him. There was something so familiar about that rabbit that the boy thought to himself, "Why, he looks just like my old bunny that I lost when I was sick. Oh, I loved that bunny." What the boy didn't know was that it really was his very own bunny who had come back to see him, for he was the first person that had made the Velveteen Rabbit feel real.